I want to do another discussion about Kant. I don't have a book with me, otherwise I would sort of get into that. But I do remember, I do have in mind that I've known for a while a few distinctions I want to make, which are fundamental to to the understanding of Kant's critique of pure reason, or Kritik der reinen Vernunft. Basically, what I want to discuss here is I want to discuss the a priori, a posteriori distinction, and the analytic synthetic distinction. A priori and a posteriori, this distinction refers to knowability, whether something is knowable or not. If I say something, is a priori or a posteriori, I'm talking about if it's knowable in certain conditions. A priori means independent of experience or prior to experience. So this is basically, the time before the baby has experienced anything. At the very, very beginning of the baby's life. And basically, a priori is something you are able to know without having experienced anything. And then a posteriori is things are dependent upon experience. So I guess if I say Tom is married, that is something I would, or let's say Tom is married to Gabrielle. I would have to know that because I experienced their getting married, or their, wedding license or something like that. I would have to experience something, or just them being together at their house, is even a good way to say that they're married. So that is something that is a posteriori. I could not know that Tom and Gabrielle are married from not having experienced that. So with a priori and a posteriori, we're talking about knowability. We're talking about how can I know this. So if I say that something is a priori knowable, I'm saying that this is knowable without the subject having experienced anything before, without empirical observation. And then the other distinction I want to make is between analytic and synthetic, and this is a distinction based upon semantics. It's a distinction. It's a distinction discussing language. If I say, if I'm saying that, it's analytic, analytic means, if I say that this judgment is analytic, that means it's true in virtue of the meaning of the predicate. Now the predicate, there's subject and predicate, like I'll say Socrates is wise. We're talking about the subject being Socrates. Socrates is the subject of that sentence. And if I say Socrates is wise, wisdom or being wise is the predicate, or the word wise is the predicate, because we're talking about wisdom, being when we're talking about wisdom when we're talking about Socrates. Now, analytic. If I say that that this judgment is analytic, I'm saying this is true because of the meaning of the predicate. Now, a good example for for a judgment that is analytic is bachelors are unmarried men. That's a great one. Now, what does bachelor mean? Bachelor, of course, means unmarried man. So, bachelors are unmarried men is true because of the meaning of bachelor. Or, we're talking about what bachelor means. We're saying this is true just because of what bachelor means. Another thing that I could say is vixens are foxes. Now, vixens are female foxes. What is vixen? Or what does the word vixen mean? It means female fox. So if I say vixens are foxes, that's an analytic judgment. That's definitely what that is. Synthetic is the other one. Synthetic means that you have to do more investigation to figure out if that judgment is true, because it's definitely not true in virtue of the meanings of the words or word in it. So, like saying that the forms are in the Platonic heavens, that is not analytic. That is definitely something that has to be figured out as if it's true through further investigating. You don't know it immediately like that just because of the meanings of the words. Now we can combine these two distinctions into things like a priori analytic, a priori synthetic, or a posteriori, or synthetic a posteriori. Now I first want to talk about the possibility of there being analytic or analytic a posteriori. Now think about the sentence, bachelors are unmarried men. Is that knowable before having experienced it? Now think about a baby, which has very little knowledge, who just let's say the baby knows what the meaning of a word is, and you just say, or what the meaning of a very, very elementary word is, and you say, this word means this. The baby will understand. The term bachelors are unmarried men is a priori knowable, and it's analytic. So basically, when we're talking about analytic a priori, we're talking about the same thing. We're talking about, well, we aren't talking about the same thing, but we're generally talking about the same kinds of judgments, because generally, a lot of things that are most things that are a priori are analytic. There is a few exceptions here which are different. Now I want to think about the possibility of analytic a posteriori. Now this is rejected by Kant. This is rejected because the term bachelors are unmarried men, do you have to experience something to understand what that is? Now, the term bachelors are unmarried men, this is a general classic analytic judgment, where the term vixes or foxes is also a classic analytic judgment. And you don't need to experience things you don't need experience or empirical observation to understand things that are analytic. You can know judgments that are, you can know and understand judgments that are analytic without having experienced things. Now, I'm not saying that a baby knows what a bachelor or an unmarried man is. I'm just saying that let's say we're talking about X, or I'm going to write a few things down here. I'm just wanting to explain this a little bit better here. If I have X the name X is X. So we're talking about why I have parentheses around, or why I have two parentheses around this X is because X is a name. Now another way to do this is to go like this. Tom, or I should write means Tom. Now, when I put parentheses around Tom and around the X, I'm referring that, and I'm trying to make that into a name, rather than X or Tom. X and Tom are entities. Tom is a person who is filled with blood, and is like that. He's a person. Now, the name for Tom means the entity of Tom. The name X refers to the entity X. Now, a baby can understand that. You don't have to experience things to know that the name X is referring to X. the entity. You don't have to experience things to you don't even have to know what X is. So like, let's say bachelor is a name. This is using the example I had before. Bachelors. This is a name for something. Bachelors are the entities of unmarried men who do not have spouses. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about something that is analytic, and which is why when something is analytic, you don't need to experience things to understand, that you don't need to experience things to understand that. I don't have to understand that the name X is referring to the entity X, or the entity X, or the entities X. I don't have to know, I don't have to experience anything to know that the name Tom is referring to the entity Tom. So this is why analytic and a posteriori are, they go together immediately, and are basically referring to the same kinds of things, even though the a priori and analytic are referring to knowability and semantics, but at the same time they both are referring to the same thing, because the semantics which are analytic, semantics of words which are analytic, judgments which are analytic have semantics in them which are where the judgment is true in virtue of the predicates or the words in that. And it just so happens that we don't need experience to understand that. So that pretty much covers analytic a priori. Now I want to think about analytic a posteriori also. Kant rejects this because, like I said before, you don't have to have experience to say that the name X is referring to the entity or entities X. So this is why we don't need experience. So that's why there is no analytic a posteriori. Kant rejects it. Moving over to the synthetic side, I want to talk about synthetic a priori now. Peaches, come here. Peaches, quit it. Synthetic a priori is, like I said, synthetic. I have to, saying that Tom is married to Gabrielle is not something that is true in virtue of its meanings. So I have to, go into further investigation to understand or figure out if this judgment is true or not. There is a couple things which are synthetic a priori, which means these are knowable before experience, and these are knowable before experience, and they the judgments of these few things are not true in virtue of the meanings. Now, one thing I'm thinking about is of course space and time, which turns into, when I think about a priori in general, I'm thinking about space and time, but synthetic a priori is generally referred to mathematics and geometry, and often physics. I'm talking about a few different philosophers here, besides Kant also. We don't have to experience things to know geometry, to know what shapes are, or we don't have to do that. We don't have to experience things to use the function of Gelton or counting. So synthetic a priori refers to generally math and geometry, and often physics, because generally geometry is how we mathematize space, and we can mathematize time through, of course, mathematics. The third thing I want to talk about is the synthetic a posteriori. Now, That's basically most everything. Synthetic a posteriori includes things that are dependent upon experience, and which are not true in virtue of their meanings. Now, saying that the sky is blue, that judgment is definitely not true in virtue of the meanings of the words in it. And of course, to even make that judgment, I have to experience empirically the sky and my experience of it being blue. So this is just a few distinctions which, are imperative to Kant's philosophy in the Critique der reinen Vernunft, or the Critique of Pure Reason. Now, I guess I wanted to get into this because I'm gonna make a few more videos about his antinomies as well as other things in the critique. So thank you.